When this shell comes off, the interior layer of that piece is revealed on which the text is recorded.
Something unusual was discovered in a forgotten cave, a fragile scroll that has historians, scientists, and podcast audiences asking difficult questions. On JRE, a conversation about a 2,000-year-old letter linked to Jesus sparked curiosity around the world, not because of miracles or prophecy, but because of who the message may have been written for and why it was hidden. A single translated line has already stirred debate about truth, silence, and legacy. But what makes this letter different from every other ancient text we know? The mysterious scroll discovered. In a quiet, unassuming cave near Mount Arbel in northern Israel, a discovery emerged that would captivate historians and spiritual seekers alike. Researchers exploring this remote cave system, carved by millennia of weather and time above the Sea of Galilee, stumbled upon a scroll unlike any other. Wrapped carefully in layers of organic cloth and sealed not with the usual string or clay, but with a resinous, wax-like substance, this scroll appeared astonishingly well preserved for something nearly 2,000 years old. Its protection indicated more than mere storage. The scroll was deliberately safeguarded, hinting at its immense importance. At first glance, the scroll resembled other ancient texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls found decades earlier. However, experts quickly noticed two striking anomalies. First, its preservation far exceeded that of typical documents from the 1st century. Second, the sealing method was unusual, signaling an intent to both protect and conceal the content within. Such meticulous preservation wasn't accidental. It strongly suggested that whoever hid this document wanted to ensure it could survive, yet remain hidden from view. The scroll's rescue and careful transport to the laboratory marked a careful progression from uncertain archaeological find to a tantalizing historical mystery. Scientists unwrapped the layers slowly, avoiding damage as they revealed the tightly coiled parchment within.
It's almost certainly a philosophical text. You can read complete sections of text.
The script, though faded, was still legible, a treasure chest of insight waiting to be unlocked. Yet its contents held surprises that would challenge long-standing historical assumptions, promising revelations far more intimate than majestic proclamations. Rather than official decrees or religious doctrine, the document was strikingly personal in appearance and tone. Its uniqueness opened a doorway to questions about who wrote it, why it was preserved so carefully, and what message it carried through centuries of silence.
Imperceptibly, you find that you're reading text that belongs on a different part of the papyrus.
Speculation grew because the letter was unlike others from the era, aimed at private communication rather than public instruction or ceremony. The humble setting of a narrow rock alcove had concealed a profound secret. The cave has served as a site of historical events that extended across multiple centuries because it witnessed both Roman military attacks and the activities of secret religious groups. The cave had produced its first exceptional discovery, which included a letter from around the 1st century that did not employ common sealing methods, but used it to protect its most important items. The discoverer brought excitement with their find, but the true value of the scroll remained unknown until scholars began their translation work. Scholars soon realized that this artifact represented something exceptional. The scroll's language was the key to unlocking its context. The scroll used Aramaic as its writing system, which differed from the standard Greek and Latin texts that people used for official documents and religious texts during that time. That choice rewrote expectations. Judea's common people used Aramaic as their primary language for everyday conversations, which they used to talk with others in informal situations. The scroll's content was meant for people who had close relationships with the speaker, while the content should not be shared with public audiences or people from the entire empire. Archaeologists discovered the site, which held much more than archaeological artifacts. The discovery revealed preserved paper, but it contained a forgotten voice from another time that used family-friendly and personal speech to express its message. The scroll contained an essential revelation that would unveil its special message through its regular human expression instead of its exceptional public display. The text proved to be an exceptional document because its preservation and language showed a complete break from established historical documents, which would change our understanding of historical events. The experts started their translation work after they discovered the ancient script, which led to a moment of extreme anticipation because they discovered new knowledge. The earliest days of Christianity faced a major shift in understanding because the message reveals new details about how people communicated, how leaders operated, and how their legacies were perceived. Hidden inside that remote cave lay a fragment of history that was more intimate and enigmatic than anyone could have imagined. Decoding the letter's language and authorship. The choice to write this ancient letter in Aramaic was the first clue signaling its extraordinary nature. Aramaic was the spoken language of Judea's people at the time.
Most scholars agree that Jesus did not speak ancient biblical Hebrew. He spoke Aramaic. It's an ancient language
used in everyday life rather than formal religious discourse. This was highly unusual for any ancient religious document, which typically appeared in Greek or Latin, the languages of authority and empire. Writing in Aramaic meant the message was personal, private, and intended for someone familiar, not for public proclamation or widespread conversion. This linguistic detail immediately raised provocative questions about authorship. If the letter was truly penned in the 1st century and addressed in this familiar tongue, scholars began considering the extraordinary possibility that it could have been written by Jesus himself. According to religious tradition, Jesus was primarily an oral teacher. None of his own writings had ever been found or recorded. Instead, the earliest Christian texts came through his followers, often decades after his death. The mention of Yaakov, known today as James the Just, in the letter's opening line electrified the realm of biblical scholarship. James, frequently described as Jesus' brother,
Catholic and other Christian ideology, actually. James, the brother of Jesus, even thought about Jesus having a brother.
In early Christian writings, was a central figure in the Jerusalem church. This pointed to the letter being a private communication rather than a broad theological text. The tone and timing aligned with a potential direct connection between Jesus and his closest family, grounding the letter in an incredibly intimate historical moment. The scholars observed, through their translation work, that the text maintained distinctive vocal and linguistic characteristics that differed from all known writings from that historical period. The phrase structure and emotional expression of the text maintained strong connections to the cultural and linguistic patterns that existed during the time of Jesus. The features of the scroll supported a compelling theory that proposed that the document represented the earliest recorded text that Jesus had written, thus contradicting the established belief that Jesus had never produced any written work. The possibility that exists now fundamentally changes all previously established beliefs concerning Jesus' life and his lasting impact. The 4 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are secondary accounts, written by followers who interpreted his teachings after the fact.
If there's any part of the Bible that Catholics are familiar with, it's the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
A manuscript existed that presented an authentic personal voice that differed from the typical polished presentations of his sermons and parables. The letter's close relationship tone indicated that the writer wanted to share his most personal thoughts instead of delivering a public speech or promoting his beliefs. The discovery disturbed scholars because it presented results that went against their predicted expectations through its actual manifestation of form and content. The document did not function as a doctrinal manifesto or a prophecy that revealed divine intentions. The present work functions as a basic yet powerful human statement that represents a believer's confession to his most trustworthy brother. The letter, which existed for 2,000 years without anybody discovering it, created more mysterious and emotional elements that enhanced the development of the story. The academic community showed 2 opposing reactions, which involved excitement and cautious skepticism. The letter received 2 different responses from scholars who considered it a major discovery, while others doubted its authenticity as a work from Jesus or an early disciple who wished to express his words. The text showed advanced linguistic skills, and its contextual evidence created a strong argument, which made scholars discuss the evolution of Christian writings and their associated traditions. The realization that the scroll might capture Jesus' own handwriting introduces a new lens through which to view one of history's most enigmatic figures, not just as teacher or savior, but as man and brother. A message, unlike any other. The content of the letter surprised scholars not because of miracles or dramatic claims, but because of its deeply personal and confessional tone. Rather than sermons or religious instruction, the message reads like an intimate conversation. The writer speaks not to followers or crowds, but to one person, James, described as a brother and trusted companion. The opening line immediately sets a reflective mood. Let what is loud grow still, and let what is seen be known for what it hides. The words feel less like a declaration and more like a quiet farewell. Instead of authority or spectacle, the message offers understanding and vulnerability, revealing a moment rarely captured in ancient writings connected to religious figures. Notably, the letter contains no mention of miracles, divine power, crucifixion, or resurrection. The focus is entirely human. The writer expresses concern about how truth is handled, stating that some messages are heavy and difficult to carry. Lines such as, "The truth must be carried," and "not all hands are made for its weight," suggest worry that important ideas could be misunderstood or misused over time. Another passage reflects this fear clearly. They see only the fire, but not the hand that lit it. They repeat my words, but do not wait to hear them. Rather than anger or condemnation, the tone remains calm and reflective, filled with cautious hope. One of the most moving parts of the letter is its compassion toward those who may misuse the writer's name. The line, "Forgive those who use my name too quickly. They are not thieves. They are hungry," shows empathy for human weakness and longing. This perspective presents the writer not as a distant authority, but as someone who understands struggle and misunderstanding. The letter appears intended only for James, a private message between brothers rather than a public teaching. This gives it a sense of emotional weight, portraying a figure carrying responsibility, loneliness, and uncertainty. Its sincerity challenges traditional portrayals centered on power or divinity, offering instead a perspective grounded in humility, trust, and human connection. Stripped of doctrine and ceremony, the message focuses on the difficulty of living truthfully in a complicated world. Hearing this voice across centuries invites reflection on faith and leadership as quiet, personal experiences shaped by relationships, understanding, and compassion rather than public display. As we move deeper into uncovering why such a message was sealed away and what it means today, the mystery only deepens, urging us to listen not just for answers, but for understanding. Themes of truth and compassion. The letter's words convey a deeply human perspective on truth, one that transcends dogma and political power. Rather than delivering commands or proclamations, the author describes truth as a burden to be carried carefully, not something to be wielded arrogantly. The line, "The truth must be carried, and not all hands are made for its weight," captures this quiet sorrow, revealing a man aware of the fragile nature of his message and its capacity to be misunderstood or mishandled by others. Throughout the text, there is a recurring sense of empathy toward those who might misinterpret or misuse the teachings. The plea to "forgive those who use my name too quickly. They are not thieves. They are hungry," transforms the traditional image of judgment into an appeal for patience and compassion. It suggests that those who grasp superficially at faith may do so out of longing rather than malice, inviting us to consider the complexities of human desire and error. The letter also grapples with the tension between visibility and silence. They see only the fire but not the hand that lit it, expresses a fear that the essence of the message will be overlooked while the spectacle or controversy gets all the attention. This theme warns against the danger of repeating words without understanding the heart behind them, a caution still deeply relevant today in how ideas can be distorted or co-opted. The letter avoids mentioning multiple well-known biblical themes from the scriptures. The text lacks any references to miraculous events, which include both the crucifixion and resurrection, as well as any divine judgments. The text serves as a personal farewell that reveals a brotherly bond between two siblings who must endure difficult truths because they lack superhuman strength. The personal confession shows multiple new aspects of the character whose representation depends on theological beliefs. The entire work uses a raw, stripped-down tone that differs from the expected formal style of sacred texts that include polished sermons and grand narratives. The author displays his humble nature, while his vulnerable state compels readers to experience emotional doubt, together with feelings of love and their sense of obligations. The document requests people to practice quiet strength while developing understanding through their compassion for others. The approach transforms our understanding of forgiveness.
Until recently, it has been impossible to read the scrolls, which are too fragile to unravel.
Which now becomes more comprehensible. The process of forgiveness here connects with two factors, which include both sin and law. The letter delivers a message that bestows deep grace because it shows how all people share basic human weakness and need forgiveness instead of judgment. This quiet humanity imbues the letter with enduring relevance and emotional resonance across centuries. The secret buried inside the cave. The circumstances surrounding the letter's concealment are as puzzling as its contents. The scroll was not tucked away in a communal ancient archive or left to accidental decay. Instead, it was carefully sealed in layers of cloth coated with resin or wax and wedged deeply into a crevice of a remote cave wall. This was a deliberate act, not preservation for public consumption, but intentional concealment, as if the letter's message was too fragile or dangerous to be revealed. Dr. Elias Carman, an expert in Judean burial customs, described the act as not merely hiding but entombing the document, meant to be forgotten rather than saved for posterity. This raises profound questions about the motivations behind such secrecy. Was the letter too personal, perhaps intended only for the recipient, James the Just, and thus never meant for others' eyes? Another possibility relates to the volatile historical context of early Christianity. The decades following Jesus' death saw political turbulence, persecution, and doctrinal disputes that often led to texts being burned or suppressed. Yet this scroll's quiet concealment differs from overt destruction, suggesting the need for protection from damage without attracting unwanted attention. It was hidden gently but firmly, preserved from being lost, yet kept out of reach. The letter's human tone and vulnerable character features lead to the destruction of growing narratives that present Jesus as a being who possesses only divine attributes and remains beyond human reach. Scholars speculate that the author or his close associates decided to avoid using intimate details because they believed it would conflict with developing institutionalized teachings. The letter existed in hiding because they wanted to protect its contents from being wrongly interpreted or exploited during political or religious controversies. Some propose that James himself might have been the keeper who concealed the letter. He understood the document's worth, yet he believed danger existed if people who lacked proper training accessed the material. The letter remained undistributed and unmentioned in early church documents because people struggled to maintain family trust while protecting delicate information. The act of hiding something enables people to think about how people keep secrets and how they reveal things. What does it mean that a message so profound was locked away, only to surface millennia later? The timing and method of hiding add layers of mystery, hinting that this letter was part of a quiet resistance against history's loud, sweeping narratives. As whispers from the past suddenly intersect with the present, scholars and listeners alike grapple with why this letter was kept in silence. Was the world not ready for its message? The letter existed as a preserved object which people hoped would reach future audiences who could comprehend its contents. This silence has now been broken, opening a space for fresh dialogue about faith, history, and the often hidden human voices behind monumental figures and movements. Impact and modern reactions. The discovery of the ancient letter sparked widespread curiosity and debate assumptions among scholars and the public alike. When the story was discussed on the Joe Rogan Experience, it created one of the podcast's most unexpectedly emotional moments.
that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript.
Joe Rogan, known for his curiosity and skepticism, was deeply struck by the possibility that Jesus, traditionally understood as an oral teacher, might have left behind a personal written message. The idea challenged nearly 2,000 years of historical assumption. Rogan's reaction centered less on religion and more on the human dimension of the discovery. He questioned how such a document could remain hidden for so long and why it had not become a larger global discussion. The intimate tone of the letter stood out to him, feeling more like a private journal entry than a religious text intended for public teaching. The podcast discussion created a public and academic debate that extended beyond their initial talking points. Some people viewed the letter as a powerful discovery that humanized Jesus, presenting him as vulnerable and reflective. People who read the text needed to understand its new definition of spirituality, which claimed all aspects of life as personal experiences instead of institutional ones. The letter became powerful because its message reached people through its basic structure. The document used its content to demonstrate 3 core values, which showed either pitiful or loving human traits through their actions. The document showed readers that they needed to establish their own personal connection with spirituality as their primary life focus. People who studied the discovery wanted to know more about its details at first. The letter presented its message about patience and humility through its quiet tone, which carried a timeless central message for modern society. The letter still contains multiple unanswered questions about its creation process and intended use. The document remained hidden from public view because it required protection against unauthorized access. The letter exists as a historical enigma that keeps its contents secret, while it functions as a reminder about pending research needs. This rare letter opens a window into history that feels deeply personal, quiet, and human. It invites us to see faith not just as tradition or doctrine, but as something lived and carried in ordinary relationships. Moments like this remind us how many stories from the past may still be waiting to be understood. If this discovery made you think differently about history and belief, like the video, subscribe for more explorations like this, and watch the next video on your screen to continue uncovering the mystery.